Okay. The first option for not using ABP framework is to use another framework, another pre-built framework. There are some options. They are not very similar to ABP framework. We find ABP framework as a unique framework. The development philosophy is very different, but you can use another tool. The second option, you can build everything from scratch without using any application framework. This has obvious advantages and some disadvantages. So in this talk, we are trying to explain why you should use ABP framework instead of creating everything from scratch. So we at the end of the session, I believe that we will be answered all the questions in your minds. So, however, first of all, I want to describe what the ABP framework and introduce it in a few slides. So if some of the followers in this talk, if they are not, they don't know the ABP framework, so it can be a good introduction. Okay, let's begin with the question, what's the ABP framework? In its own website, in the description, ABP framework offers an opinionated architecture to build enterprise software solutions with best practices on top of .NET and ASP.NET Core platforms. It provides the fundamental infrastructure, production-ready startup templates, modules, themes, tooling, guides, and documentation to implement that architecture properly and automate the details and repetitive works as much as possible. This is the slogan and main definition of the framework. So basically, the framework fills the gap between plain ASP.NET Core platform and enterprise software development requirements. In the base, we still have .NET framework and ASP.NET Core because we believe it's a good framework to create web applications and HTTP services with C#. ABP framework sits on top of this platform and provides architectural options and infrastructure for real-world business application scenarios. So when you use ABP framework with your application, you focus on your own business code and let the ABP framework handle the repetitive details for you. For example, I want to demonstrate a quick code example to better understand as a developer. This is a typical application service. You can think it implements a use case of the application. The use case here is to create a new book in the database, to create a new book entity. You see that we are injecting a repository, then we are using this repository if the given book is already exists and throw in an exception in that case. Then we are logging something, then creating a new book entity using the repository and inserting the entity to the database. Finally, returning the data transfer object by automatically mapping from the book entity. So this is our use case. When we use ABP framework provides a lot of base services, infrastructure, and automates something for us. For this example, ABP framework provides the application service base class. So when we inherit from it, we have a lot of useful base properties and conventions by default. As a first and basic convention, it automatically registered to dependency injection by default. So ABP framework provides the generic repositories for us. We can, when we define an entity, we can freely inject the repository for that entity to our services. ABP uses ASP.NET Core standard authorized system, but extends it by introducing permission system, which is a very detailed, fine-tuned permission system for users and roles. So it automatically checks the permission and throws exception if the given user or client has not this permission. ABP automatically handles database transaction management and database connection management for you. So you don't have to create a DB context, create a database transaction. Everything is done by the ABP framework. If you throw an exception, like in that case, the transaction is automatically rolled back. If you don't throw any exception, then the transaction is committed automatically by the ABP framework. ABP automates and simplifies the validation, can automatically write the usage logs, that's called audit logging. It automatically handles every kind of exception, serialize the exception message to and send to the client. And in the client side, it also handles the exception properly. So if you use ABP Framework, you don't write your code to handle the exception, and ABP automates it. So there are a lot of more actually localization, object-to-object mapping, and accessing to current user, managing and getting settings, and so on. So all these details are everyday requirements for a serious business application. So ABP provides most of this for you. ABP Framework was like that, but the ABP Framework is actually much more. In the core part, we have framework, yes. We have also a commercial part. So this is how Volosoft survived. And we have a community platform. In the framework side, the framework consists of hundreds of NuGet packages. It's modular. You can use whatever NuGet package you need. There are startup templates. So instead of starting from Microsoft empty startup template, you can start with a fully production-ready startup template. There is a CLI tool that automates some operations for you. There are UI teams, pre-built application modules, many examples. Especially, we have some major examples, like EventHub is a fully working event organization website that's built with ABP. And eShop on ABP is another solution which demonstrates how to create microservice solutions with the ABP framework. We have a great documentation and even an official book sold on Amazon currently. In the commercial side, if you get an ABP Commercial license, you get more startup templates, including a microservice startup template. More UI teams with richer options, more application modules for your applications, even with including source code. ABP Suite is a tool that automates creating CRUD pages for your applications, and we provide a premium support for commercial customers. In the community side, we organize events like this event, ABP Community Talks, and we are currently organizing a full-featured software development conference, named it ABP Conference. It will be organized in May. It will be announced with details. We are we are creating articles, and also we are getting many contributions from the community to the community.abp.io website. There are video tutorials and articles there you can visit and learn not only ABP related topics. There are also general software development and .NET related topics. We have a blog, and finally ABP has a Discord channel, so you can join our Discord channel to discuss with the other ABP developers. So our main points are, we can summarize like that. If you use the ABP framework, you don't repeat yourself. You focus on your own business logic. You learn and apply the software development best practices. And finally, you will be more productive and enjoy coding. This is how I can introduce the ABP framework in 10 minutes.
Yeah, so in your first slide, you showed a code snippet, business logic. It was very clean and understandable, but in the background, ABP framework adds many functionality: audit logging, input validation, transaction management, localization, and many more. And but when we look at the code, it's very clean and understandable, I think this is the most important part. And in the second slide, you showed that this is not a library or tool, but it's a full stack solution with integrated with many tools, libraries, communities, and there is a professional team in the background, and there is a very big community behind the framework. And when you face a problem, maybe it's solved by many more people before you, and these are, I think, main points to use a framework instead of writing your own tool framework or what else. So if we go step by step, we should start with creating a new solution. So when you decide a new project, or when you get a new project, you first start a new solution, or Visual Studio solution, or you create a solution from a template. What is the advantage of starting with ABP rather than creating a new plain ASP.NET Core project? Like, how does this ABP make difference on the startup space?
Okay, great point. The most important point to start something is the beginning. Yeah, creating a new solution is the starting point of technical implementation of a software project. So when you start everything from scratch, it's very hard to prepare a robust solution structure to start your development. You know, many business applications are falling in the long term because of not building a maintainable code base. So to be able to create a maintainable code base, you should have a robust architecture and the solution structure. You should know which libraries you should know you will use, and which practices and patterns you will implement in your software, and so on. So when you start with ABP framework, you will have a startup solution that is well layered based on DDD principles. Or if you are creating a simple solution, we already have a non-layered solution templates, but I'm talking about maintainable solutions. So if you create everything from scratch, you should decide how to organize your code base, how to implement layering, how to integrate to third-party libraries and systems, how to set up your automated tests, which libraries you will use for common requirements, not only for backend. For example, in the backend side, there are a lot of libraries for different purposes. For example, for ORM, you can use Entity Framework. For object-to-object mapping, you can use AutoMapper. For background jobs, you can use Hangfire. There are a lot of tools. So investigating all these tools and deciding which one to use, integrating to your solution is very heavy work, actually. When we come to UI team, creating a responsive and modern looking UI is really another job. If you are lucky and have a designer, it will take maybe months of development to create a base team for you. Even if you buy a UI team from, for example, Team Forest, or from a platform that sells pre-built teams, integrating it to your solution, upgrading this team after building some functionality is very hard and maybe impossible. So ABP Framework brings all them together and well integrated, so you can just start your application from the first day. And also, even if you create such a solution, it's hard to document it. It's hard to train your developers. It's hard to determine a coding standard for your developers. ABP provides all this. So it's very clear. The architecture is very clear. How to write code is very clear. So when you work with a project with ABP Framework, you can easily switch to another one with ABP Framework, because all the structure is similar. So all the best practices are very clear. So I can say like that for the beginning a new solution.
Yeah, that's that nonsense. Like, project structure, essential libraries integration, applying a UI team, setting up automated tests, applying coding standards are very important. And I think starting from ABP is a good idea in terms of these topics. But let's talk about repetitive tasks. Repetitive tasks, like there is this key principle: don't repeat yourself. This is, I think, all our software developers around the world are trying to reduce the repetitive tasks by using frameworks, tools, libraries. This principle aimed at reducing repetition of software patterns, replacing it with abstractions, or using data normalization to avoid redundancy. I think this is an essential reason for creating a framework. How does ABP save our life or time for such repetitive tasks?
Yeah, developers are smart guys, and they don't want to repeat themselves or
Yeah.
doing everything again and again. Actually, software development is for that, to automate repeating works of other people. So as a developer,
Mhm.
why we repeat ourselves?
Also, what is repetitive task? Maybe some of our
Yeah.
visitors
For
wouldn't.
example, the best known repetitive tasks are cross-cutting concerns, called in software
Mhm.
projects. Like, a software project consists of thousands of use cases. Every HTTP request can be considered as a use case. So in every use case, or in every web request, you should care about database connections, you should care about database transactions, handling exceptions and reporting these exceptions, returning a proper error response to client and handling error in client side, implementing authorization and validation, and much more. For example, saving audit logs and so on. All these tasks are actually very similar in every use case, and it's independent from any business. So it can be automated. We generally use interceptors or action filters in ASP.NET Core to automate these details. But not only cross-cutting concerns are repeated. For example, if you are creating a solution from scratch, the authentication part maybe will take your weeks of development, even without starting a valuable business operation. Single
Mhm.
sign-on, LDAP integration, Active Directory or Azure integration, social logins, two-factor authentication, reset password, email activation, new user registration, password complexity, and much more are very standard features that a standard user will expect from your application. So if you implement all this from scratch, it will take not weeks, maybe months of development, and you will probably make bugs because you are making everything manually and so on. So
And you are
ABP
focusing on
framework,
your business logic. You are focusing only your business logic, and your boss or manager will not care about these potentially costing items.
yeah. Everyone will be
Yes.
asking about the
The first
visible
page.
business features,
Yeah.
not infrastructure. So if you start from scratch, you will think about everything from scratch in every project.
Yes. Um, like in big or long-running projects, developers generally create shared libraries, like with many base classes, like entity bases, repository base classes, or controller base classes, some enums, constants, helpers, and so on. What does ABP provide in terms of base classes?
Okay, every framework starts with these base classes. If you start a framework, you generally start by defining entity and repository base classes. Yeah, I know. So in a serious project, we will typically see a library that collects all these base classes. So other parts of the solution will use these libraries, especially if the company is building more than one projects. this shared library is essential. Otherwise, you will copy the base infrastructure code to every project. By the time it will be evolved in every project in different ways, so it will be very inconsistent base code for your company. So ABP Framework, and also even if you create these entity-based classes, repositories, application services, controllers, and everything yourself, it's not easy to implement all this as with best practices. It requires expertise. So ABP Framework provides all these base classes and even utility services and helpers for you in the first day. So you can just inherit from these classes, directly use this architectural infrastructure. Especially for DDD, ABP provides a lot of infrastructural feature for you.
It's also good for new beginners to learn how to structure their new projects. And let's talk about non-functional requirements. So there are functional requirements and non-functional ones. Most of our developers' time is spent to create some non-functional requirements like infrastructure features. They not only slow down our business logic, but also causes us to repeat all these again and again. And sometimes it cannot be possible to create these in the same quality since we have a deadline pressure. Can you tell us what kind of ABP features cover these non-functional requirements?
Yeah, as you said, the purpose of our application to implement the functional requirements. That means use cases of the business application. However, there are many standard requirements that's very common in every application. For example, an audit logging system, ABP provides an audit log system, even with histories of every entity. So this is very requested feature from a good application. A detailed permission system can be counted in this category. Maybe an infrastructure to make your entity soft delete, or even consuming your backend APIs from frontend is generally required to create abstractions, wrappers, and some interceptors. So a normal a business application, a typical enterprise application, generally use background jobs, for example, which ABP provides a background job system. It may require to work with different multiple time zones, and it may require a lot of such common requirements. For example, even if we think the ABP commercial side, for example, there are a lot of pre-built business application modules like file management, chat, and so on. So if you need such application requirements, it's already here. You can take its source code and customize based on your requirements. So ABP provides a lot of infrastructure and pre-built application modules for these common application requirements.
Yes. In terms of third-party integration, we can say that almost every line of business application is integrated to a third-party service or a library. Like, for example, we know that when we want to use RabbitMQ, all we want to do is sending a message to a queue and handle the incoming message with a small code snippet in our solution. For this purpose, we need to learn the specific API of RabbitMQ, handle failures, connection problems, and learn how to optimize connections with pooling, deal with transactional message sending, processing. And later on, when we want to switch to Kafka, the alternative of RabbitMQ, then we should go to the documentation of Kafka, read all the API docs. So what's the advantage of using ABP in terms of third-party integration?
Yeah. As you said, most of developers' time is spent for implementing such third-party integrations. RabbitMQ was a good example. For example, you assume you must use RabbitMQ to implement your distributed event bus. Actually, all you want to do is send a message to a queue and handle the incoming message.
Yeah,
that's all you want. But you need to understand the messaging patterns, queue, and exchanging details. To write, you need to write an efficient code to communicate with the RabbitMQ server. You must probably create a pool to manage connections, clients, and channels. You must also deal with exceptions, acknowledgement messages, reconnecting to RabbitMQ on failures, and much more actually. Because the plain RabbitMQ library is very low level, and it's like that because it should give all the possibilities to work with RabbitMQ. However, most of the time, maybe 99%, you don't care about all these details. All you want is an optimized integration and send and receive messages. So ABP provides an event bus integration and that abstracts all these details. You send and receive messages without the hustle and bustle. So if you need to write a low-level code, you can always do that because ABP doesn't restrict you to reach the underlying APIs. So in brief, creating these such abstractions is a very common way. Even if you start from scratch to build your application, you will see that even for getting some data from Redis will take maybe 5 or 6 lines of code. Then you will decide to create a common function or common service to abstract these details and use the Redis with a single line of code. So by the time you will have a framework base. So why do you do that every time for every project? So ABP provides all these integrations for you. It's well documented and tested. You can directly use, and when you need that, you can directly use Redis always.
Halil, I think this is similar to using Entity Framework Core. Like Entity Framework Core is an abstraction on top of maybe 30 database management systems, and you are not dealing with all the specific APIs of these database management systems. You just write your code, and if you want to change your mind to use another database management system, you just change your configuration, and that's it. You bump to another database management system, as we did in our ABP IO websites. So when you want to change from Kafka to RabbitMQ, maybe your ABP code will not change. You will change some configuration endpoints, and that's it. This is very good to use a framework rather than doing your own library. And let's talk about architecture and best practices. So we are best known as applying best practices in our code base. And building a software architecture, I think, requires years of experience and great knowledge of best practices. Let's say we are a junior developer and we need to start a very big project. Somehow we got a very big project from a customer. How does ABP help us at that point?
Yeah, as you said, software architecture is actually a different position in software development. And to be honest, most of teams have not such a position, or even if they have, maybe the architecture is not very experienced. Even if he or she is very experienced, he may not have time to build all the architecture. So when we come that through, we see that having a robust and clear architecture in the beginning has a good value. Actually, this is the point we have built the ABP framework. ABP framework provides 4 kinds of main architectural structure. The first one is modularity. The second one is multi-tenancy. The third one is microservice architecture. And the fourth one is domain-driven design and layering the solution based on DDD. So if you want to implement and learn these structures properly, it's very hard. It gets a big time and it requires a good expertise. If you want to learn everything from scratch, for example, for modularity, probably you will design a wrong modularity in your first projects until you learn how to do it properly. So ABP provides documentation and a model for all these architectural infrastructures. So you can learn the best practices in the first day. You can understand, not only use this best practice, but learn them. This is a good point.
Also, sometimes I got message from developers that they learned many things from ABP code base. They didn't create any project, but they just discover how we solve the problems in our framework. And it's very good code base to see how the experience is working on a real world framework. Do you want to add something more, or I can change the topic?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, so let's talk about modularity. Like everyone is trying to achieve modularity function in their projects. Modularity means like your application can be divided into smaller working modules, and this helps us to scale our project or replace a module with another one. And we all know that ABP was born to be a modular system, and it has pre-built application modules in the platform. Can you mention about ABP's modules and what are the benefits of using them?
Building a truly modular system is not easy. Actually, I haven't seen any exception. If I see a big solution, then when I talk with the team of the developer team, they always say they are trying to build modular system, or even they think they have created it. However, it's not most of the times. And everybody understands different in modularity. For example, if someone splits their code base into folders, they may think it's modular. Sometimes they split solution into projects and they think it's modular. Actually, all this may be a part of modularity, but it's not a complete modularity. So if you are creating a module, a module's feature should be completely independent from other modules. It should include everything from database layer to user interface layer. And it should work with any kind of application without knowing the main application that is. This is very hard. If you target that, it is hard to achieve. But however, we spent maybe months of years of experience and development time with the ABP framework to achieve that. At this point, ABP is a true modular system, and we demonstrated that with creating a lot of modules. If I also count the ABP Commercial, we have created more than 30 modules with the ABP framework, and none of them, maybe a few with a few exceptions, none of them are depending on each other. So they are truly reusable. You can remove a module from your application and use it in any kind of application. So I think ABP's modular system is very good for large-scale applications, and it is especially good if you want to convert your modules to microservices later. I think we will talk about that in the next questions.
Yeah. Maybe for the past 5 years, I got from the community or from developers to create a microservice project. Microservice is still trending and hype word in terms of software development. And we and other people are trying to create their first microservice projects, but there is a monolith application. that we have done years of development before. We know that the most the professionals, the software professionals, recommend us starting a monolithic application and then moving to microservice over the time. However, it's not simple. It's not that simple. What's ABP doing to facilitate this and help us to make this decision?
Yeah, great point. They say to do that, but they generally don't say how to do that. And
Yeah.
it's highly dependent on the software, it's dependent on the technology you are using. So it's very hard goal. So for most of the project, if you start from monolith first, then try to convert to microservice, you will come to a point that it cannot be easily shifted to microservices, because it's very hard to maintain that kind of strict modularity to the end of the solution. In some points, you will see that it will be very easy to implement some use case if you just reference from a module to another, or if you access to another module's database from a module, you will see that it's very easy to implement something. So you will do that. By the time it will be turn a mess. So it will not be possible to switch to microservice later. So ABP Framework offers a strict model to implement that properly. So as I said in the previous question, all our modules are microservice compatible. This is our goal, and we have documented how we have implemented that. We have a best practice guide, consists of several documents that strictly explains what should do, what should not do to make a modular monolith that can be possibly converted to a microservice solution later.
Okay, so there is a community power behind frameworks. So a good framework must be backed by the community. And there are thousands of .NET developers using the ABP framework, asking questions on GitHub, Stack Overflow, discussing on the ABP Discord server. So I'm a simple developer. Why it's so important to have such a big community?
Okay, short question. If a framework has a good community, then you can find help when you have a problem. That's main point for every type of library or software in development. However, we are trying to do more. We are trying to build a platform which has a good community that helps to each other, that creates contents and so on. For example, there are a lot of platforms to write articles. For example, Code Project is a great resource for articles. However, when you visit the Code Project and read an article about the topic, you cannot directly implement it to your solution, because the author is doing things very different from your solution. They have a different kind of solution structure, they have different assumptions, they have different architecture, they have different tools and much more. However, when you read an article on ABP Community Platform, it's mostly directly implementable in your solution, because we are all sharing same conventions, same infrastructure, same libraries, same coding styles, and much more. So the ultimate goal of creating the ABP framework and ABP platform actually was that, to create a community that understands software similarly and develop it similarly, and develop themselves also, not only applications, develop themselves with the power of this community.
Yeah. Maybe up to now, we talk mainly about the open source ABP framework, and we know that it's completely free for everyone, but there is a paid version, and it's called ABP Commercial. What does the paid version add on top of the open source project? Why should I start with the commercial version instead of using the open source side?
Okay, good one. We are also getting this question. Actually, ABP Framework was born as open source. For years, we haven't gained any money on top of that. By the time we have introduced some add-ons and some commercial add-ons on top of the ABP Framework, actually, I'm mentioning about ASP.NET Boilerplate and ASP.NET Zero. However, this is the next generation of these platforms. So I can say some same things for this platform. So ABP's open source side is not a demo, is not a restricted version, is not a false open source project. It's true open source project and it's completely free. And you can create serious applications based on the open source side. This is the fact. When we come to ABP Commercial, we thought that what we can provide additionally to that platform to make things even faster, especially for enterprise companies. So if you have enterprise company and if you if you are creating a business application to have some money, so then you have a budget and all you want to do is to make your development faster as much as possible. So with the ABP Commercial, we provide startup templates. For example, if you want to create a microservice solution, it's possible with the ABP Framework open source side. We have even created an eShop on ABP. However, if you buy ABP Commercial, we are providing a directly usable microservice-based startup solution. So you can start your microservice solution from the first day. It is well documented and implemented with best practices. When it comes to pre-built application modules, ABP Commercial provides many more application modules, and they implement enterprise best practices and enterprise requirements. For example, the identity module is also exists in the open source side, but the ABP Commercial has some more features like two-factor authentication and so on. For these are very common for business applications. Also, ABP Commercial provides a UI team that's full-featured, professional, nice-looking with dark light and support and so on. And also, ABP Commercial provides a code generation tooling. This is the one of the most loved part of the ABP Commercial. It can automatically generate CRUD pages for you from the database layer to user interface. It's generating the code as just you write with your hands. So it's easily modifiable. It's maintainable code. And also, when you buy ABP Commercial, as an enterprise or as a serious company, you want to get support whenever you have a serious issue. So with ABP Commercial, we are providing a commercial support and even email support. So this is the ABP Commercial provides on top of the ABP Framework. Maybe you may add more, Alper, if you want.
I just want to get a question from the community. So Kreshimir says, do you have a plan to publish on Udemy some premium ultimate courses with ABP Framework? We already started courses on Udemy. Go to Udemy, write Volosoft, and you will find the first videos here. The upcoming video courses will be also free. And we started creating a video series of ABP fundamentals. These courses will be for beginners or new starters. So we can go to, I think, next topic. Let me get me. So up to now we talked more advantages of using a framework. Let's talk about disadvantages of using or hesitations. using ABP Framework or any other framework. Like any developer see that there is a great opportunity to use a framework. However, why not build our in-house application framework at our company? If we build our own framework, will it be more suitable to our requirements? Can we talk about pros and cons of such an approach, creating our own framework?
Yeah,
Okay.
actually, Berkan, you have.
Berkan, you want to
Berkan,
answer this question?
this time you can
Yes.
start by answering these questions, and then I can add more.
Okay, thanks. As you know, building an in-house application framework can be a viable option for some companies. But it is important to consider the pros and cons before making a decision. Here are some points to consider. I can say customization and integration as a pros. As a result, you can change a framework you developed yourself as you wish. And it is relatively easy to make it better integrated with other in-house services. On the other hand, we can add cost, expertise, and maintenance to the cons. To define it briefly, as you know, building an in-house framework requires a significant investment of time, resources, and money. This can be a major drawback for smaller companies or startups with limited budgets. Moreover, building an effective and efficient framework requires a team with a deep understanding of software development best practices, as well as expertise in the specific technology stack being used. Finally, an in-house framework requires ongoing maintenance and support, which can be a significant burden on the development team. This can take resources away from the other important projects and initiatives. In contrast, using an existing application framework like ABP has its own set of advantages and disadvantages: time and cost savings, robustness, community support, and so on. For instance, using an existing framework can significantly reduce the time, resources, and cost required to build a custom application. And established framework like ABP have been truly tested and optimized over time, making them more robust and reliable than a custom built solution. And again, established frameworks like ABP have large communities of developers who contribute to ongoing development and maintenance, providing access to wealth of knowledge and resources. Of course, it's not without its disadvantages. On the one hand, it's an application that you developed completely yourself, and on the other hand, it is the ABP framework, which is the easier to customize. Definitely, ABP has limited customization than your in-house framework. Of course, we can say about compatibility. In summary, building an in-house application framework can be a viable option for some companies, but it is important to carefully consider the pros and cons before making a decision. Using an existing framework like ABP can provide significant time and cost savings, as well as access to robust community of developers, but may have limitations on the customization and require additional learning and training. I hope I was able to provide some insight into that. What is your take on this topic?
Okay, thank you, Berkan. While I'm listening to you, I also asked the same questions to ChatGPT, and it answers similarly. Customization can be an advantage and integration to the company's internal systems. However, I believe this is not a disadvantage with the ABP framework because it can be integrated with anything, and it allows to customize highly. The cons and disadvantages is really important. Development time is obviously a problem. It requires a good expertise. It's not easy to develop an application framework. I think the hard part is the maintenance. I saw a lot of such, not framework, but internal shared library, a set of libraries at the best case in companies. However, it's not documented. Some genius developer has built it. However, she left the company and no one knows how the framework works because it's not documented. It's not explicitly. ABP has a GitHub repository. There are a lot of issues and pull requests.
Even
very
it's
explicit.
documented. Even
Yeah,
it's documented.
and so on.
The guy left the company. There is no one to continue the project.
Yeah. At the end of the day, most of such framework development works is ending up with unmaintained code base, unmaintainable framework. At worst, there will be a lot of projects depending on that framework. No one knows how it is working. So it's very hard to create a in-house framework. So if you have enough resources, for example, if you are a bank, maybe you can have a dedicated framework team to create a framework. However, if not, I don't suggest to do that, because I tried many times in my software development history.
Let me get a question, and then we can continue. So Washington Acero asks, I want to use the ABP framework, okay, but without the pre-built identity modules. So as you know, ABP templates come with predefined modules, and if you don't want it, you need to remove, or you can start a new project and add the required modules. Maybe you can explain it, Halil.
Yeah, actually, ABP has more than 300 NuGet packets. I didn't count the commercial part. So everything is modular, everything is optional. There is only one core package that defines the ABP infrastructure. If you reference to that module, that package, this is called Volo ABP core package. If you reference that, there will be no modules, there will be no database integrations, no RabbitMQ, nothing, just the core part. So whenever you need a functionality, you can add the corresponding NuGet packs. That's definitely possible. We haven't have a startup template, a web application startup template for that, but it's very easy, and it's also documented, I suppose. If you visit the docs ABP.io,
Halil, I think this is the document.
There is a document, yeah.
So in this document, you create a new ASP.NET Core project and then add ABP as a reference. So you don't deal with predefined modules, or you don't need to remove them one by one.
Yeah,
okay,
that can be an option.
I think it's an easy enough answer for Washington. Let me switch to other hesitation. The learning curve. Learning curve is something hard for a developer to start a new library, framework, or a new programming language. But on the other side, we know that every tool speeds up our life in software development, but it's there a learning curve. A framework is generally a complex thinking, because it solves some complex problems under the hood of the application. On the other hand, a good framework should simplify the usage of itself. Can you mention about ABP's learning curve? Is it worth to learn it or hard?
Okay.
Yeah, Berkan.
Thanks. In my experience, ABP has a moderate learning curve. The framework provides a lot of useful features and abstractions to simplify development. But it does require some familiarity with the underlying concept and architecture. However, ABP's documentation and community resources make it easy to get started and learn how to use the framework effectively. That's it. What do you think about this topic?
Yeah. Actually, my short answer can be like that. Maybe I can compare with another framework, with Angular, for example. Learning Angular is not easy, believe me. When you check its documentation, it's not so easy. However, it's very easy than building the Angular framework. because Google have many developers and with a good expertise and taught everything of a single page application development for you. If you start from scratch, you end up by creating a similar infrastructure, similar things yourself. So as always, actually, for example, driving a car is much more easier. Learning how to drive a car is much more easier than building the car yourself. If I want to talk ABP specific, I believe that learning curve is much lower than not using the ABP framework. By following our tutorial for getting started tutorial, even not experienced ASP.NET Core developers can successfully build a CRUD page with a production-ready source code. So if you compare with just creating the CRUD page, it provides a lot of infrastructure for you. It simplifies database connection. It automatically handles exception handling and much more, for example. If you don't use ABP framework, you should all learn this, or you should make the same mistakes we have done in the previous, in the past. You should implement all these details with best practices yourself. You should learn much more than learning the ABP framework. One point I want to mention about this topic is that ABP, for example, using DDD patterns, domain-driven design patterns, and so when you use ABP as a non-experienced developers, you see some concepts like aggregate root, repository, application services. What is that application service? What is the difference between domain services? You have some questions about this. So you may think that ABP is complicated. However, this is not ABP. This is DDD. If you learn DDD in any way, it will be that hard. And also ABP simplifies and make it easy. For example, even without knowing the aggregate root pattern, you can easily inherit from the aggregate root class of ABP and use it without knowing it. So ABP doesn't force you any architecture actually, but what I want to say is that most of the topics are related to general software development rather than the ABP framework. ABP framework brings a lot of things together. For example, with some of these principles and patterns, maybe you will meet these patterns in 3 years later in your software development. However, you meet all this together with the ABP framework today. So it may seem complicated at the beginning. I understand some people. However, I believe the learning curve is much lower than not using the ABP framework.
Okay, yeah, the car example is very good. And actually, I opened Google and asked from New York to Washington, what time does it take to get by car? It says 4 hours, 4 and 25 minutes. And if I want to go on foot, it says 84 hours, which means 3.5 days. So there is this car. The car is ABP. And maybe you will, if you start learning it, maybe in 4 hours, you will learn it. And then you can drive this car to Washington. But on the other side, you know how to go on foot because you are always doing that. No need to learn anything, but it's very time consuming and you will be very tired in the when you arrive at your destination, and it's very hard to maintain this. It's not easy to go on foot to another location. So in the end, you need to learn a framework and a car or any other vehicle to speed up your travel. So this is a very good example for using a framework. And most of the time, I think we are creating CRUD pages, create, read, update, delete functionality. And like 10% or 15%, we are creating complex scenarios. Is ABP getting a big overhead for simple CRUD applications where we don't need all the features of ABP provides?
Okay.
Where you may start.
Thanks. As Halil said, ABP provides a wide range of features and tools, which can be helpful for developing complex applications. But it can also be used for simpler CRUD applications. While there may be some overhead associated with using the framework, such as additional libraries and dependencies. This is generally minimal and should not significantly impact the performance of your application. In fact, ABP's modular architecture allows you to easily disable or remove any features that you don't need, further reducing any potential overhead. Overall, ABP can provide a significant boost in productivity and development speed, even for simpler applications. Halil, what would you like to share your perspective on this topic?
Yeah, actually, I think it's not overhead. Actually, ABP Framework simplifies building CRUD applications because CRUD applications are more suitable to automate when you think that, because they are just very standard code. So ABP provides default repositories, CRUD application service-based classes, pre-built DTO classes for CRUD style, data, simplified client-to-server communication. In the UI part, there are UI components, helpers, and much more to build CRUD functionalities easily and with the production quality. So when you use ABP Framework, building CRUD paste is much more easier than not using it. If you use the ABP Commercial side, ABP Suite automatically creates this kind of CRUD paste in a few seconds. So, and also I think most of the applications and systems are considered simple at the beginning, but they grow over time. Once your application grows and you need to implement some advanced requirements, then ABP will help you even more.
Okay, I think enough answer for this question. And let's talk about performance. Also, I see some performance questions on the chat side. I sometimes hear such questions. Our project is very big and it's unique. Millions of users will use it. So everyone comes like this. Is ABP capable of handling a large number of requests? Is it suitable for big applications? What do you think?
Okay, Berkan, do you have any answer about that?
Can you first?
Yeah, I can do it first. Okay. Actually, I didn't see much framework or library that's not scalable. The scalability is something different, actually. It's mostly related to your architecture. It's mostly related to your actually deployment environment. If you don't scale your application in your development environment, even a Hello World application cannot answer to millions of users. So ABP doesn't have anything that slows down your applications. It automates some details for you. For example, it automates exception handling. It can write audit logs, and it can actually do a lot of things in every web request. Yeah, this kind of stuff gets time and slightly slows down your application. That's true. However, if you don't use these features, like disabling this feature, then it will be normal. And if you don't use ABP and implement these features yourself, for example, if you implement exception handling, database transaction management, audit logging, validation, authorization yourself, it will also take time. It will also consume resource because it's the code. It will take time. However, we see that there are systems scaling with ABP Framework, and there is no problem with the ABP Framework's performance.
Okay, for this one, I want to add something, Berkan. Sorry for interrupting you.
No problem.
There is a gist in my GitHub profile, and there is a project to, okay, we made a stress test with JMeter, and we created two projects. One of them is without ABP. it's the raw ABP ASP.NET Framework project. And with ABP, we created a simple book controller. We added some CRUD functionality to the controller. And then we made 10,000 requests to both projects. And here, the important part is the throughput column. Maybe I can make it bigger. Okay, the upper side is with ABP, the downside is without ABP. As you see, with ABP, it took 9, 5, and 8 seconds. And here, 9, 8, 9 without ABP throughput, which means like 5% overhead coming with ABP. And I think it's worth to handle big requests or big enterprise applications. If you want to see the Gmeter configuration, you can copy this link and check out how we made this performance test.
Yeah, actually, and also I want to add that even if you implement all this yourself, it will be probably more than 5%.
Maybe worse.
Also, yeah, and also the important part is not performance. Actually, it's the scalability. If you can horizontally scale your system, then there is no problem.
Would you like to add anything, Berkan?
Yes. By the way, I agree with you. ABP is designed to scalable and can handle large applications with millions of users. The framework is built with performance in mind and uses best practices for handling large volumes of requests. Additionally, ABP's modular architecture allows you to optimize and fine-tune your application for maximum performance by enabling or disabling certain features as needed. That's it. Is there anything else you want to add?
No. Okay, let's talk about databases, supported databases. Someone is asking me in the chat, why didn't you use MySQL or another database management system? We could use it. There is, it's all compatible with MySQL, Oracle, Microsoft SQL, PostgreSQL, SQLite, and other platforms. So these are supported database management systems by default. Can I use any other databases or UI systems?
Yeah, this is one of the asked questions. We cannot have integration libraries to all possible database management systems. So in ABP, we have a direct integration with Entity Framework Core, which works with most of the relational database systems. And even I think it's working with Cosmos DB. And also we are providing a MongoDB integration library. The integration library essentially provides some base classes and implements some abstractions in the framework, like repositories, unit of work, and such APIs. So if you want to use a database management system that's not directly supported by the ABP framework, you have two options. You can directly use their own API. So you can use just like using in a .NET application. ABP doesn't have any restriction or help on your implementation. If you want to use that tool just like using Entity Framework with the ABP framework, then you should implement repositories yourself. You can do that. However, you don't need that. You can just use any kind of database management system with the ABP framework. Just use its library as normal NuGet packets and so on. It's also for the UI side, ABP, ABP's backend system is completely independent from UI. That is how we can implement Blazor, MVC, and Angular in the front end. So it's possible to use Vue or React or any kind of UI library or UI system in the UI side of ABP framework. However, in this case, you should directly use the REST APIs and endpoints provided by the backend of the ABP framework. For the front-end side, if you use Angular, for example, we are also providing some services, some pre-built integrations and shortcuts to work with ABP framework based backends. However, it's not restricted. You can use any kind of UI library as long as you properly know and use this front-end library.
Berkan, you want to add anything?
No, thanks.
Okay. So when I talk to developers, they sometimes ask me if ABP is a CMS, like content management system. Actually, is ABP a CMS like .NET Nuke or Orchard?
Yeah, it was actually it was an old question. Currently, most of people well understood what we are doing. However, still there are some new developers meeting with the ABP framework and asking that questions. The short answer is not. Yeah, ABP is not a content management system. It's a generic business application development framework. The framework, ABP framework, doesn't make any assumption for content management system or any kind of application. ABP is a well-layered so that the core modules are web or ASP.NET Core independent. And it can be used to develop console applications, background services, even Windows services, if you like to work with all kind of systems, or any .NET compatible application it works with, not even with ASP.NET Core. So by the way, the ABP framework provides modularity, and a CMS module or a CMS system can be developed on top of it. That's completely possible. And we are already providing a content management system kit module that provides some common CMS primitives so that you can build your CMS on top of the ABP framework.
Okay. Berkan, do you want to add anything for this question?
Actually, this is an excellent answer. What can I say more?
Yeah, it's not a CMS. So
Yeah.
I'm going to take one question from the chat side and let's pick a question. Özgür Ezgin, do you think using a framework is tightly coupling something? Is it a risk to couple a framework?
I think a good question.
It's a very good question.
Yeah.
Who wants to answer it?
Yeah. We can even make a standalone community stand-up for that. Okay. Short answer is yes. Yes, it's a risk.
Yeah, it's a risk.
The developers may just terminate the framework and so on. However, it's not impossible to not couple to a framework in today's. Even if you don't use ABP framework, you will use .NET framework. .NET framework is Microsoft's framework. If we drop the ABP framework, you somehow continue because it's open source, free, and so on. But if Microsoft drops .NET framework, even it is open source, you cannot use it anymore.
I would like to, yeah. Sorry, you continue.
Yeah, in the front-end side, you use Angular. In the not only framework, there are a lot of libraries and systems. And
yes.
In the today's development, actually, the development is something like that. You bring all the tools, libraries, frameworks together,
orchestrate.
make them working good with each other, orchestrate them, and then build your business application on top of that. ABP does all these things for you. You start with the business application development. Yeah. So, it's a risk.
Also, I would
just like driving a car is also a risk. So
tightly coupling to a framework is something like falling in love with someone else. If the girl
it's not that bad.
Yeah, but if you find your love, then it's good. But it's a toxic relationship.
No, it's not that bad.
So if there is the millions of thousands of developers using it, and it's a very powerful framework, it's very good to use it, and there is no risk.
Yeah.
But if you are using some specific framework who doesn't care to maintain it, it's a bad risk.
Yeah, and specifically talking about the ABP framework is here maybe around 10 years, beginning from the ASP.NET boilerplate. So we currently have a company working with around 30 people, only working this framework to build this framework, a lot of things. You know, there are some frameworks in the web like Woo, that's developed only one or a few people, and millions of people are using it. However, here currently there is a company behind this ABP framework, and this company is also providing ABP Commercial. So we have a strong financial situation, and we have enough resources to maintain it. And it's also open source and contributed by the community. So for the ABP framework, I see that it's not risky at that point. It's in a trustable point.
Even all the brain team crashed in an airplane accident, then there is a community behind it who will survive with forking it.
Okay, let's continue.
Let's continue the next one. Let's take a look at from the developer's point of view. ABP automates a lot of things, and you don't have to worry about the low-level programming problems. So if I use such a framework as a developer, will it weaken my software development skills?
That's every developer may think sometimes while using an abstraction. Not only a framework, even, for example, want to export some data table to Excel, for example, you are using a library to do that. So you don't actually learn how to use Excel. You just learn how to use that simple library abstractions and do your stuff in a few hours and so on. So for these questions, first of all, ABP is not a low-code or no-code tool. It's for developers. It not only makes you more productive, I believe that ABP make you learning best practices of software development, because all the documentation not only explains ABP features, but also explains software development best practices, concepts, and like DDD. For example, for DDD, we have even written a standalone ebook for implementing best practices. So I believe using ABP framework improves your development skills, not weakens.
Okay. Does ABP force us to use a specific architecture like DDD? Because I saw someone asking, should I use DDD?
Yeah, I can shortly answer that. ABP offers an infrastructure for DDD, yes, and it suggests it for medium to large scale applications. However, just like the most things in the ABP framework, it doesn't force you to fully implement DDD. You can even make a database connection in your UI layer while it's not suggested. So we can, with ABP, you can create any kind of application with any kind of architecture. As I said before, you can even create a simple console application or background job service. So if you want to use DDD, I believe it's best to use with ABP framework. However, if you just want to build your application without knowing the DDD details, ABP already provides repository services for you, for example, and base entity classes. Just use this and don't mind the details of DDD. However, if you want to create a modular system with bounded context in DDD, if you want to truly design your aggregate rules, ABP is here to help you. However, it doesn't force you.
Okay, so Igor, I think we answered the question. And I think I can switch to the last topic.
Before the question answer session. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Depending on a specific DB provider, ABP uses abstractions for database management systems. Should I also follow the same principle? What if I want to depend on a specific DB technology such as EF Core?
Yeah, I want to answer this very short. You can depend on any database management system in your applications if you want that. If you don't consider to change it later, you can directly depend on MongoDB and the framework or RavenDB, another database management system. No problem. ABP Framework doesn't depend because it can work with MongoDB and that framework and other database providers. So it's an unopinionated about this. So it has integrations and abstractions. However, for your application, you can go with that. However, I always suggest to somehow abstract database queries and database complexities at least from your application.
Okay. Can we switch to the questions?
Yeah, actually, that's all. We have prepared some pre-built questions and answered ourselves for you, everybody. And we have also talked about why you should use ABP Framework instead of creating applications from scratch. So now we can go with your questions for 10 minutes. We know already we have it's more than 1.5 hours. It's longer than regular ABP Community Talks. We know that, but the topic is important and it's like a reference for example, you want to discuss with your manager to use ABP Framework, so you can redirect to this talk, and we are answering here to them why you should use the ABP Framework. So let's go with the questions.
Okay, Jean-Claude, he's asking, he says that there is a war between Angular and React developers. So React allows more freedom, he says, than Angular. Is ABP like Angular or React? Like, are we providing freedom to the developers or we are restricting them?
You answer.
Okay, in terms of opinionated framework level, yeah, we have some, we selected some tools and libraries, but you are not obligated to use these. You can replace any libraries, tools. We have some abstraction points to make smaller changes in your customization. But if you don't want to, if you have radical changes, you can completely replace a component. You can rewrite the implementation of our interfaces. The framework provides some simplicity. On the other hand, if you want to make radical changes, it's also free and you are welcome to change everything from the bottom to the top. You want to add, or can we switch to another question?
Yeah, I don't know React. I partially know Angular, so I cannot make a good comparison. But when we first start the ABP framework, this was our main goal, to provide freedom to developers. So we are trying to make a hackable framework. Hackable means is not secure. It means allows developers to customize and replace everything, override everything as much as possible. So we trust developers and we allow everything replaceable. So I believe it's much more customizable and overrideable than both frameworks. Okay.
So the similar question, it's the same question. He wants to remove OpenID dict and replace with ASP.NET Identity.
Definitely. For example, if you are building an MVC UI library application, then you don't need to OpenID dict actually. So you can just remove the OpenID dict packets, and you don't need single sign-on and other authentication flows. However, there is a problem with Blazor WebAssembly and Angular currently, because .NET, has nothing to provide the authorization code flow or resource owner password flow for the user interfaces. So even Microsoft uses Identity Server in startup templates. So for Angular, you should, if you remove OpenID dict, you should implement some token-based authentication yourself. That's possible. However, as you know, there is no pre-built solution in .NET except the OpenID Dict and Identity Server currently, unfortunately. So for the OpenID Dict, we as Volosoft is a sponsor. We are sponsoring this OpenID Dict library to make it more maintainable for .NET developers.
Okay, Stanislav is asking, this is a question that we have answered. Is ABP Framework well suitable for development of mid-size ERP? So as I said, I hear this question very much. CRM and accountant-like systems which contains hundreds of entities. So huge numbers of CRUD pages.
Yeah, I believe ABP Framework is perfect for this kind of applications.
And also, there are customers that I know they are using in very big projects like international, and there are hundreds of concurrent requests in the project. So this is not a deal with ABP Framework, I think. Another question is using a monorepo, because we are also using monorepo in our framework. How would you organize a monorepo for multiple clients? Keep shared modules and modules for the customer. So there is a issue. You have customers, and some customers try to change the code base, but you don't want to get dirty your code. Would you split the code into different solutions for every customer, or what you do in this case?
Yeah, actually, we are using monorepo approach. In our monorepo, there is a framework solution. Okay, the question was one solution or multiple solutions. We use multiple solutions because when you add hundreds of projects into a single solution in .NET, it's very hard. It's time-consuming to open and develop the solution in Visual Studio. It has non-technical, but in practical, it has some limitations. In any way, in monorepo approach, we have a framework, we have module solutions, we have startup template solutions. In private side, we have the ABP IO website is another solution that directly depends locally to do ABP Framework. Yeah, our website, when you visit ABP IO, it works with ABP Framework, not with the released package, with local package. So that means it depends on development of the ABP Framework.
Okay, next question. What about job opportunities as a developer who is familiar with ABP Framework? I will add my Discord channel here. So there is a Discord channel for these jobs here, and people who are experienced on ABP Framework are here, and you can go here, and there are some hiring messages here. You can jump into those and chat with the people who wants to hire ABP developers. Also, will ABP have a module store to create opportunity? So they want to create ABP modules and they want to sell it. Is it possible in the short term?
Yeah, maybe I don't give a promise for the short term, but we are working on that idea.
Yeah, there is a plan.
It's not easy. It's not easy, but we are working on that.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's like selling something on Google Play Store or Apple Store. It's a very big financial structure. So there is no technical stuff, but the financial things is very hard in this area. Let's pick another one.
Last 5 minutes, Alper.
Okay.
We may not answer to all questions. Sorry,
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah. I see that almost we got 70 questions, which is hard to answer for this night. Does the ABP module system allow us to auto-discover modules of deployed to a certain folder?
Plugin modules is possible. It can read DLLs in a specific folder and load all the modules from that. Yeah.
Okay. Does ABP Framework support outbox pattern? out of the box for transactional messaging.
This is a very important pattern for a robust event messaging in a distributed system. And ABP supports outbox pattern, and also it supports inbox pattern that ensures single execution of incoming messages. So it supports.
Okay. Jean is asking, will it be possible to prepare some tutorials on how to publish custom modules to the Nugget repository, how to manage versioning for ABP modules? Publishing to Nugget, I think this is not related to ABP. What do you think?
Yes, I think we should prepare such a documentation. I think it's explicit when you follow and understand the ABP's documentation and ABP's behaviors and modular system. You can easily build your modules because there are already pre-built modules as open source. There are more than 10 modules already built open source, and there you can just see their source code. There is even a module startup template. You can create a new module, then just deploy this package of module to the NuGet or something like that. How to manage versioning? I didn't understand. Versioning should not be a problem. I didn't understand the question. We can go to the next one.
Okay, Hassan is asking, is there any plan for supporting .NET MAU on ABP mobile side?
Yeah, actually, as I remember, I don't work with MAU UI side much, but with ABP Commercial, there is a MAU UI startup template for the mobile side. Yeah, we provide in the ABP Commercial side.
Do you have any plan for CQRS pattern and mediator?
Currently, it's not in the short-term plan. If you want to implement CQRS, you should go yourself. You should understand the library or pattern yourself. You should implement it. We want to implement it. However, it's not in a short term.
I think we can finalize this session.
Okay, Bige, are you still there?
Bige,
Yeah.
come up.
I'm here. So for the exciting part.
I hope you are not sleepy there.
No, I wasn't. Actually, I was following the incoming questions, and it was quite fun to see new faces in the chat. I don't know if you have realized it, but until this talk, I felt like we have a core followers, but for this one, we had quite many faces. So hello, everyone. This is Bige with Volosoft team and ABP team. So for the winners, I would like to say, normally we were saying, please send us an email saying I am the dotUltimate winner, but for this one, it was a giveaway party. So I would like the winners to replace the X with the thing that they have won. And for the winners, dotUltimate winners are Maxim Reality, Mohamed Rashad, Stanislaw Tristan, and ABP Commercial Personal License winners are ProCube, I guess, Muhlis Atach, and ABP Conference 2023 ticket winners are Rostislav Kosmirak, Terry Bentley, Rian Van Eden, Ronald Walcott, and Özgül Ezgin. I guess I'm so sorry for my pronunciation.
It's not a problem.
You know, I can say
They
it.
They can read their names at the bottom of the screen, I think.
Yeah. For ProCube and other people who don't have their actual names, please send us a screenshot of your YouTube account to marketing@volosoft.com, And also, I see a lot of flowing emails to our inbox in marketing@molosoft.com. Probably they are for the $750. Please send us your emails and we will take care of them tomorrow. And also for the resources, you would be able to find them in the description box below as of tomorrow, probably. So thank you so much for everything, you guys.
Yeah, it was very
We'll
long,
see you on the next one.
but we still have almost 100 people listening. Thank you, everybody. See you in the next ABP Community Talks.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah,
see you
see
next
you.
time.
Thank you. Bye.